When I was in college, I used to house sit for a family when they would go on their annual family vacations. The one I want to talk about today was the one that forced me to quit house sitting for them. I was in my 20s and was trying to make ends meet. House sitting was one of the many side hustles I had. The family would be going on a 2-week vacation abroad and wouldn't have any service, so if anything went wrong, I would have to call the police or their relatives depending on the situation. Just keep in mind that I've already had a few creepy experiences with their house prior to this, but it was never scary enough to deter me because they paid me very well. I used to work at an animal shelter, so I was well versed in animal care, and I knew about cat behavior. This family had 4 cats who were all very well behaved. For the first few days, all was well. I slept in the guest bedroom and went to school from their house because they lived close enough to where I could just walk to class and didn't have to pay for parking or bring lunch since I could just go back to their place. Then the issues began after a few days. My boyfriend at the time came over with dinner to keep me company, as he knew I was always a bit creeped out by the house. We sat in the guest bedroom and watched TV for a few hours eating, until he said he needed to go home. Sometimes he'd sleep over, but he told me on this particular night that he had a strong gut feeling he needed to sleep at home. He urged me to go home because that gut feeling he had was really bad. At that point, it was around midnight, and to be honest, I didn't want to go home. To put it bluntly, I have a complicated home life and didn't get along with the only time I'd get a break from home was the annual house sitting once a year, and I didn't feel like wasting it. My only sibling, who's also my best friend, moved out due to the toxicity, and honestly, home wasn't home without them anymore. I told him that I'll be fine and I'll lock up after he left. He was still really uneasy and tried to persuade me to go home once again. He tried to explain that while he had slept over before, for some reason tonight the house just felt unsettling. I reminded him that there was a home security alarm that I always said, the neighborhood was safe, and I had 4 friendly cats with me. He reluctantly left and drove home, and that was when it started happening. I shut all the doors and windows, locked everything, and set the security alarm. Once I got comfortable in bed, the TV started to turn on by itself. I saw the remote on the nightstand. I quickly turned it off. Just as it went off, it turned back on. I thought it was strange since the TV was working perfectly the entire night, but it was even stranger that when the TV turned on by itself, it went to this off channel like it was just black and white, like it had no signal. So I kept turning it off, and it kept turning on. I began to freak out and unplugged the TV entirely. I told myself that the house was just renovated, maybe there were some wiring issues. I still didn't go home and went and slept on the couch instead. The next day, my boyfriend came over again. I told him about what happened the night before, and he told me that I should have just went home. I was pretty freaked out, but honestly, it was still not as bad as having to deal with my family. That night, we had dinner together again and watched a movie in the living room. The house is 2 floors. There's a first floor where you come in through the front door straight into the living room, and the second floor is actually the basement, which is essentially a big living room with another room that can be used as a spare bedroom. The stairs leading downstairs are incredibly creaky and creepy. I don't understand why they didn't fix it during the renovation. As for the cats, they love to be everywhere and anywhere. That night, as we watched the movies, my blood ran cold as I heard sounds from the basement that sounded like an infant crying. My boyfriend froze as he slowly turned to look at me, as if signaling to me silently if I heard it too. I remembered from my time working in the animal shelter during my training that sometimes cats sound like babies. The cats like to be around people and will follow you around the house, but not close enough to cuddle. I counted and only counted 3. The little younger cat was missing. I figured it must be the younger cat and went downstairs to the basement where I found it stuck in the spare room. He was smaller but more energetic than the other cats. He somehow closed the door behind him and was stuck in the room all alone. I carried him up the stairs and we resumed the movie. Mid-movie, we did pause it as it was time to feed the cats. The owners had a strict food schedule for their cats. The cats' food station was in the kitchen, and the kitchen was the only area that connected to the basement. To best explain the layout of the house, the main entrance connects to the living room. The living room then diverges into 2 different sections. One connects to the kitchen and the other connects to 3 bedrooms. One being the spare bedroom, a master bedroom, and another bedroom that belongs to the family's child. For these cats, the only time that they didn't want to be around humans was while they were eating and after they ate, as they like to take naps or rest with their full bellies. They like to nap in the master bedroom or the teenager's room, as it smells like their family. They always did this every year that I babysat them, so it wasn't new. It also wasn't unusual to not see them for a little bit after mealtime. As we were enjoying dinner, we both once again heard crying noises from the basement. It was naturally louder because we were in the kitchen, which was closer to the basement. I didn't see any cats in the kitchen, and I didn't think to check the living room because I was panicking internally. My boyfriend was visibly creeped out, and I told him I'd check it out since it was likely the cat again. I couldn't help but notice that the cries sounded a little different from earlier. It was more frequent and higher pitched. I turned on the lights to the basement and slowly crept down the stairs, saying the cat's name. With each step, the crying got louder, but when I finally made it down, the crying abruptly stopped. I checked the spare room, any crevices, and under the couch. He was nowhere. At that point, I was feeling so scared I could hear my heartbeat in my head. But I ran up those stairs like my life depended on it. When I got back into the kitchen, I felt my whole body go cold as my heart sank. My boyfriend was standing in the kitchen with a horrid look on his face as all 4 cats surrounded him. He told me that as I went down the stairs to the crying noises, the 4 cats came out at the same time from the area where the bedrooms were. No cat had been downstairs the entire time. I immediately and silently packed up my items, jammed it into my backpack, and we both left the house. For the remaining week, I would only return to the house once a day to clean the litter box and feed them. I know I was going against their eating schedule, but at that point, I really didn't care. After the last day, I locked up, dropped the keys into their hiding spot, thanked them for the opportunity, but that it was my last time, and I never returned. I should have stopped much sooner. I still remember calling my sibling during the drive to my parents' house after the incident. I felt even worse when they revealed that they also had their own experience in that house and kept it away from me because they knew I was trying to save money to move out, and they didn't want to scare me. First, I'll start off with descriptions of all of those involved. My name is Kelsey. I was 17 years old at the time of this event. It was March 19th, 2016. I was dog sitting at my mom's friend's house for some extra cash to help me out before going off to college next year. It was a cool spring night, and the people I was dog sitting for have a super cool sunroom where my friends and I like to smoke, so I decided to invite 2 of my other friends over to spend the night and make this whole dog sitting thing more fun. Haley and Sammy were a little older, with Haley being 23 and Sammy being 22. They brought over some vodka for us to drink. We hung out for a couple hours, drinking, smoking, laughing, and catching up. Then we start to get a bunch of phone calls. Now normally this would not be weird, except for the fact that the phone was supposed to be disconnected. We ignore the first couple phone calls, thinking they'll leave a message or a call back in the morning, as it was nearly midnight. The calls were persistent, and we could tell this person was not going to leave us alone until we answered. Sammy decided to answer the phone, and there was a man on the line, claiming to have the owner's wallet at a gas station 25 minutes from the house, which did not make sense. This man insisted that we come pick up the wallet now, which we all found extremely odd. After minutes of this man insisting that it was urgent that we come pick up the wallet, Sammy finally got the man to understand that we were not leaving the house. We hung up the phone and all got a weird feeling in our stomachs. We grabbed the dog, Willis, and run into the back bedroom, shut all the blinds, and locked the door. We already have impaired judgment because of the weed and booze. We talk things out, and we decide we were just being paranoid, and the man was just trying to make sure we get the wallet back to the owner safely. Hours go by of us drinking and smoking some more. Then we decide to watch a funny movie and make some food to calm down and get ready for bed that night. We move from the sunroom to the living room and pop in a DVD. The door in between the pool and the sunroom does not have a lock on it, but the door that's in between the kitchen living room and the sunroom does not have a dog door for Willis to go out back to go to the bathroom. So we all agree that although we were a little spooked by the phone call, we were in a safe neighborhood and Willis would bark if anything were to come to the door. Time creeps by. We were laughing on the couches, Haley and I sitting next to each other on one and Sammy across the room on the other. The clock struck 3 a.m., and that's when things started to get creepy. Remember earlier how we left the lockable door open to the sunroom so that Willis could get outside to pee? That's where he entered from. That feeling suddenly became overpowering. I turn towards the kitchen and see a dark mass hunched over in the kitchen. I freeze and for a second think I'm seeing things. I watch as this mass reaches up into the cabinet, and that's when I realize there's someone in the house. I nudge Haley's side with my elbow and say real quietly, "Haley, I think there's somebody in the house." She looks into the kitchen and screams bloody murder. This dark mass then whips his head around and looks directly at me. We make eye contact, and I felt my entire body tense up. All I could see were his piercing blue eyes contrasting against the orange lamp just below the cabinet on the table. Everything else was covered by his black hoodie, pants, shoes, and gloves. He even wore a ski mask that covered up to his nose and mouth. Sammy then gets up to look at what Haley and I are staring at, and somehow musters up the courage to yell, "Get the fuck out." He calmly closes the cabinet and slowly walks out the sunroom doors. We immediately get up and rush to the corner of the room farthest from where he was crouching and call 911. They arrive 3 minutes later and search the entire apartment, take our statements, and sit outside the house for the rest of the night to see if the intruder would come back. We leave our booze, weed, and my car all at the house with the cops and the dog and head home. We come back the next day to find clothes all throughout the house messed with, and crumbs by the doggy door, understandably so Willis wouldn't bark at whoever came in. To this day, we still have no idea who called us and or who came into that house. I have not been back since. I'm 28 years old. I've been an animal lover ever since I was a child, which led to me pursuing a career path that had to do with animals. I'm a veterinary assistant, but for a while I also had a little side gig in which I'd offer to house sit animals for people going away on vacation and such. This ranged from cats to dogs to birds. Being a young female who also already works at a veterinary hospital, most people weren't intimidated by the idea of me staying in their house while they're gone. I wasn't just some random person off the street. My credentials were all over the internet. I got a response to my ad one day from a man named Jeremy seeking my services. He had a 20-something-year-old macaw and a cat that he needed to have watched for a weekend while he went away. He brought up a price right away and offered me $300 for the entire weekend. I accepted that offer because that was a fair deal. I have experience dealing with birds of all types, including macaws, but this would be my first time I'd ever watched one for an entire weekend. I met Jeremy at his house. It was a basic, normal corner house for the neighborhood. He was a short man in his late 50s if I had to guess. He had graying hair and a graying mustache. He seemed very friendly. In my experience, most animal lovers are. After meeting Jeremy, I met his bird Ringo and his cat Casper. Ringo was huge. I've handled macaws in the past, which I assumed was part of the reason Jeremy hired me. He told me about Ringo's personality and quirks and how to get him to quiet down if he makes noises. Ringo kept saying "Daddy's home" as Jeremy would handle him. He laughed and said that's what he says when he sees him. After showing me how to clean the cage, he showed me the rest of the house and told me how often to feed Casper. He asked that I don't go into any other bedrooms upstairs besides the guest bedroom where I'd be sleeping, which was understandable. There was a bathroom upstairs right next to the bedroom, and he told me I could help myself to his food. However, I'm a vegan, so I brought my own food for the weekend. After all of this, and him getting to know me a bit, he gave me the key to the house and left. I watched through the window as he drove off, and I was left alone with Ringo and Casper. It was already late in the day at this point, like 8 p.m. Casper was already fed, and Jeremy already left enough food in Ringo's cage for the night. The cage was in the living room in the center of the house, right next to the TV, so I turned on the TV and plopped down on the couch. Casper was hiding somewhere in the house out of sight. Ringo was just sitting in the cage watching me. After a couple of hours of watching TV and eating my little dinner, I went to bed. I slept with the bedroom door open, and I woke up in the middle of the night to a sound. The best way I could describe it was 2 loud cracking sounds. I sat up and listened for a second. Nothing, so I laid back down and went back to sleep. There was a giant bird in a cage downstairs. Hearing sounds was not unexpected. The next day was pretty easy. I cleaned up Casper's litter box, fed him, and fed Ringo. I let Ringo out to play for a couple of hours. He perched on the back of the couch behind me as I watched TV. Fast forward a few hours, and I left the house to go explore the area a little bit. I went for a walk in the park and FaceTimed a couple of my friends. I did a little driving around too and picked up some food for dinner that night before returning to the house. It was around 7 o'clock when I returned. I interacted with the pets for a couple of hours as I ate my dinner and watched TV. Jeremy was supposed to be returning home late tomorrow. I called it a night early again. I went to sleep with the door open again. However, once again, I woke up to a sound. This time, I believe it was the sound of the bedroom door closing. I looked up and saw that the bedroom door was now closed. While the windows were open, there was little to no wind to create a draft. This was weird. I also could hear sounds from downstairs. It sounded like Ringo moving about in his cage. I got out of my bed to check on him and make sure he's okay. As I was walking down the stairs, I heard him talking more clearly. I got to the cage and saw he was wide awake and walking around. I remember what Jeremy told me to do to get him to quiet down. Hand him a particular treat. I dug into the bag to grab one, but then he said the phrase, "Daddy's home." I found that odd and slightly unsettling. I put a treat in front of Ringo's face and he grabbed it. This ultimately did end up getting him to stop making noise, but it still felt weird that he'd wake up in the middle of the night. I went back to the bedroom and left the door open. I fell back asleep, and I shit you not, I woke up once again, maybe a little more than an hour later. This time I didn't hear what woke me up, but I looked up in the room in a daze, and in the near pitch black darkness of the room, I saw a black mass in the center of the room, moving away from the bed and out the door. I sat up and almost screamed until I fully came to. I now had to wonder if what I just saw was a hallucination or not. I grabbed my phone to turn on the flashlight, but on the screen, I saw I had gotten a text from Jeremy around an hour ago. It was him telling me that if Ringo makes noises in the middle of the night, it's normal and to ignore it. I stared at my screen, rereading the text at least 10 times. That text was sent conveniently around the same time I got up to give Ringo a treat. I felt ill all of a sudden. That black mass in the room I just saw. What if that were real? What if it wasn't a hallucination? I got out of bed and turned on the lamp. I started packing my bag as quickly as possible. I didn't bring many clothes, so I was packed very quickly. I quietly went to the bathroom next to grab all my toiletries quick. And then I tiptoed back out of the bathroom, and I was in the near pitch black upstairs hallway with all the bedroom doors. I looked down the hallway, and I could swear I heard the faintest sound coming from one of the bedrooms. I don't know why, but this overwhelming curiosity almost hypnotized me, and I crept down the hall to what I presumed to have been the master bedroom. I put my ear up close to the door, and I heard a rattling sound. It sounded like a bed rocking. He was in there. That fucking creep. I knocked on the door and said, "Jeremy, are you in there?" The rocking sound stopped, and there was now dead silence. I repeated myself, and this time said, "If you're in the house, I need to know right now before I leave." Still silence. I left the house in a hurry, leaving the key on the table, and I didn't look back. On my drive home, I sent him a long voice text saying I'm considering reporting this to the authorities as some sort of stalker or breach of privacy situation, and that I was extremely disturbed that he was in the house. He immediately tried calling me 3 times, but I was honestly too scared to pick up. He then sent me a text apologizing and stating that his brother unexpectedly came home that night. I knew it was complete horseshit. I demanded he just pay me and I won't pursue this any further. He sent me a payment via Zelle, and that was that.